Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Jasmine Martirossian, founder and chief strategist of Strategy Ark, which specializes in digital marketing, leadership development through Gallup Strengths, and strategic planning to build effective marketing and sales teams. Before that, she was the VP of Marketing at Mercury and at TÜV Süd, which is based in Munich. And she was just listed at number 11 in the 2024 list of the top 50 CMOs on LinkedIn. Congratulations, Jasmine, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure and honor being on your show.
Thank you for being here. So we've been talking about a number of issues related to marketing today, and the issue that seemed pretty interesting for both of us is an issue around beliefs and action. And we've been talking about the issue that most people believe that beliefs have to come first before you can take action. And I'm reminded of the book, Start with Why by Simon Sinek, famously, right? So kind of starting with the idea of why and then kind of focusing on beliefs. But is that true or not true? Do you think most people need to start with their core beliefs coming in line before they take action? How does that really work for most people?
It's easy to say beliefs come first, and beliefs do play a huge role in our lives because we're value driven. Every company talks about their values, driving, working to the values, mission, driving with beliefs. But truthfully, action very often shapes beliefs in a more powerful way. And there's a lot of social psychology, scientific research to substantiate why this is the case. There have been a number of experiments going all the way back into the 70s and 80s, 1970s and 1980s, where people, for instance, would be asked to wear a, little kind of brooch that said, "Oh, I support breast cancer research." And then if they were asked a few months later, those in the control group that wore that brooch would be more likely to donate money because now they'd already acted in support than those who did not wear the little brooch. So it's making a world of difference. Like if you can really drive a lot of your team behavior to better outcomes if you can show the way, convince people to act a certain way or to test something in action before ramming the belief in them. Because it's very powerful when you do something and you see a result. Usually I say nothing succeeds like success, because then you're already building on that foundation for success. And generally, when it comes to driving with change management, a lot of big change management initiatives fail because they start hammering only at the belief instead of starting smaller, showing success and building on that success.
So what is the role of creating mission statements and value statements and those kinds of things in an organization? Why do companies spend so much time and energy on that and trying to convince their employees to believe certain things or the marketplace?
They're exceptionally important when done and executed right. First of all those value and mission statements have to be easy to remember. If it's a doctoral dissertation length thing that lives on a wall or on a shelf somewhere or in some hard drive, nobody cares about that. They have to resonate with people, but above all, the mission and value statements that work really well are those when the organizations actually live those and show that practice in action, where employees are empowered to act a certain way. For instance, Nordstrom's rule book said rule number 1, use common sense. Rule number 2, look at rule number 1. If you've been ever a customer at Nordstrom, they will run to you, they will take clothes to the fitting room, they'll secure a room for you, they'll work with you. They're using common sense. And that goes a very long way as opposed to just, having a 40-page manual that nobody will read. So
if you want to have your employees kind of do the right thing or do the things that's important to them, you've got to have kind of some belief structure. You're not saying not to have mission, vision, and core beliefs, but it sounds like what you're saying is that if you want them to really believe, that you've got to really move them in the right direction of actions in order for them to start to incorporate that and believe that really fully. Is that the basic idea?
yes, and you have to model the behavior, right? If you're not modeling the behavior, you're not going to be kind of the prototype of what they produce. It's, you have to walk the walk rather than just talk the talk. Those mission, value, vision statements are exceptionally important, but they have to resonate with people. They have to ring true. They cannot be hypocritical. So when they ring true, they become a reinforcing mechanism as you onboard new people into the organization, as you grow that culture. For a lot of organizations, unfortunately, way too many, that is not necessarily the case. There are mission statements and value statements and vision statements, but they're usually jumping from one to the other, living, by the flavor of the day idea, and without never really delving, prioritizing, and kind of walking the walk.
Yeah. So what's an example of how companies get this wrong? So, and do it in the wrong way. Is it, when they kind of just put together that mission and vision and put it on the shelf and really don't act on it? Or how is that? How are they really screwing up in this area?
It's not that anybody sets out to screw it up. It's that it happens very often through inertia, right? Like it or not, in organizations, there's a lot of separation between the C-suite and the rank and file employees. And then there are the levels of middle management, which I usually will joke about, that it's kind of the ice layer where lots of vines come to die because they wilt. All the vines wilt on that mid-level. So a lot of the time, C-suite has great ideas. The people who are on the ground dealing with customers, they may have some great ideas, and somehow it gets complicated, doesn't travel up, doesn't travel down, and there's usually a breakdown. Good organizations where there is no breakdown, there's like openness, there is consistency, understanding of the why is extremely important. By the way, when you tell people because there are social scientific experiments on that, social psychological. When you tell people, I need this because, even without explanation, you get 40% more compliance. So very often, only because it's clear to the C-suite, it may not be explained well enough to the next level down and the next level down, and then it never really makes it to the rank and file of the organizations, those who are on the front lines, actually those who are dealing with employees and communicating that message, right? So as a result, it's like a phone tag. As a result of that, there's huge breakdowns, and it's very hard for people or organizations to really correct that and reinvent themselves.
So
Very often there are way too many layers.
yeah, so you get people to do the right things. That's based on the real core, the culture of the organization. It's so funny, one of my first jobs was working at McDonald's,
Mhm.
behind the counter, taking the cash, taking the orders, all that stuff many years ago. And that's where I learned to say please and thank you. Because everybody had behind the counter, if you're interacting, it's a very fast moving organization. The fries are coming out, the burgers are happening, customers are in a hurry. They trained us to say please and thank you in every interaction. And I still do that today. And so, but that created an environment of trust and respect in the employees, how we were treating each other. It's not like they told us, hey, respect your fellow employees, right? And then, good words will come out of your mouth, right? They told us we had to say please and thank you. Is that an example of what you're talking
That's a
about?
great example
Yeah.
because that permeates through your culture, right? That becomes a core part of your culture. By the way, University of Toronto has an Institute on Civility, which shows a lot of their research and studies show that when people are just civil to each other, those organizations thrive much more. But there are so many organizations where there aren't even communication norms. Like, for instance, what is the norm? How soon are you expected to respond to an email within an organization or to a text message? Because in some, it could go unanswered for a week. That's not desirable. But in others, you might be read the riot act if it's not responded within 10 seconds, but you might be sitting in a meeting. Do you see? There should be those are little things that are both well articulated and become baked in, implicit in the good cultures. Good cultures know what the rules of engagement are. Bad cultures become a free-for-all or toxic environments that really disengages people. And Gallup research shows that unfortunately, majority of employees in North America, even more so in Europe, are very disengaged. That's losing companies billions of dollars in revenue every single year.
So you're a Gallup strengths coach. And so what's the underpinnings of this philosophy of, get people to do the right thing and action first and then their beliefs and will follow? Is that part of just how we're made up, how we think as humans?
Well, Gallup's philosophy is rooted in positive psychology, right? Let's face it, majority of corporate America works from weaknesses. Annual reviews, quarterly reviews, biannual reviews, whatever review cycle they have, they're largely dreaded by most employees because even managers feel like they have to come up with something negative to say. And then they harp on that. And sometimes they may not even lived up to the expectation of being a good manager, leader, having provided feedback in the moment. And like this is 6 months later or a year later, and they're harping on something. And that message really gets lost for people, right? So it's not helping, it's only hurting. When you focus on strengths, which is what people are really good at, where they get their flow, where they get their energy, where they keep on learning, energized, then you can amplify those strengths to serve your teams and your organization way better. And most people, every person has their unique strengths. In fact, I think it's you get only one in like 33 million, according to Gallup's research, that you'll have two people having exactly the same strengths in the same sequence, which means people are very unique. Now, understanding how to energize each unique person, understanding what resonates with them, it may require a different communication style with each person. And that's where the power of good leaders comes in, because when you work from strengths, when you have strength-based teams, you have high-performing teams. These are the teams that really deliver. You place the right person in the right seat. Like I've had employees that were really not acing in a given role, but then I was able to move them into a different role that spoke to their strengths, and they soared. That makes a difference rather than just like discarding the person. Trying to understand what each person's strengths are makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, in your experience as a senior marketing leader managing teams of people who had big responsibility to get things done, how has that philosophy and that approach kind of worked out for you? So, can you give some examples of how that you've been able to help your organizations thrive using that approach?
Absolutely. So it's very basic. You start with having them take a top five strength. So generally it's your top fives. Actually, it's more like your top 10. But when people understand what their top five strengths are and they understand what the individual strength is within that cocktail, then they can lean more on that strength. So in having leadership performance conversations with them, in trying, it's easy to complain about problems, but you have to come with a solution, even as a manager providing feedback. If you say, hey, if you lean more on this strength, because you're an achiever, you can do this, focus on this part, or you have strategic in your top five, which means you're going to be seeing patterns, lean on that. You have individualization, which means you see the specifics about every person. Well, focus on that when you're working with your target audiences. Then you amplify the power of what they already have within, and they're energized rather than having their wings clipped, saying, well, you're really not good at this. So everybody has, think of strengths as tools in a toolbox, right? Some are at the top, some are at the bottom that you may not even reach for. So the ones that are at the top, you're better off maximizing those. In reality, in life, I mean, even when it comes to the tech stack, we rarely maximize the use of anything. And that's detrimental. Like instead of sometimes you have functionality within a certain offering, and marketers will go buy something else just for one functionality without delving into the depths of the other.
Yeah. So you're kind of looking for the strengths in each individual and mapping them to what they could be best at. And that's the characteristic of a really good leader or manager that you're doing that. But we're talking about
Thank you.
beliefs and actions. So eventually you have to get them to do the right thing and kind of do the thing that's their job. How do you work with people who are not doing the right thing? So if they're, you're trying to get them to take actions, you're not addressing the beliefs, or maybe you're addressing it somehow. What's the best way to work with people who are not on the right path, taking the right kind of actions?
Well, first, before determining that they're not on the right path, you have to keep yourself accountable as a
Mhm.
leader of people. Have I clearly given them guidance as to what's expected to do and the outcomes? And have I provided them the tools or listened to them or identified gaps? You have to be honest with yourself first. Once you've done that, then you have, again, provide the right guidance, give them certain timelines, drive accountability. Don't let it, do not micromanage, actually empower them, but know when to ask for accountability. There's a huge difference between hanging over somebody's shoulder and keeping them accountable to deliver by this date. I personally have, as I grew up in marketing, I have pretty much acted in every possible marketing function, from public relations to content writing to SEO to creating website pages, to email marketing, you name it, social media. So with that, I have a very intense understanding of what each effort takes. So be realistic and manage the expectations, and then have those conversations in real life in a timely manner rather than deferring forever. If there is a pattern that's of complete non-performance, then maybe it's not the right fit. That also happens, right? Sometimes people are just not in the right environment, and they may need to be almost liberated to go spread their wings doing something else. Sometimes people settle. But on the other hand, you may have people that may not be an ideal fit in one role, but would be a great fit in another. I had an employee who was a lousy, terrible fit for content writing. Seriously, not a good fit. However, the same person was fantastic in an inside sales role. So where this person was like at best a D minus, and content writing was an A plus in inside selling. Same person. So having the flight of thought to look at the possibilities to understand, have I placed the right person into the right seat, makes sense all the time. And also be very intentional about hiring. There are ways to test the person ahead of time rather than just hire fast and fire fast, hire slow, fire fast, as they say.
Yeah, and make sure you've got the right person. Well, that's a phenomenal example, because you know, all the teaching on beliefs to a person who's a bad content writer will never necessarily make them a great one, when they really should be in another seat where they can take actions and do the right things. It sounds like you're an advocate of really deliberate feedback, holding people accountable, holding yourself as the manager accountable, in all the time. So it's kind of a continuous process with people. What do you think the role is of the semi-annual or annual review? Is that something that's helpful, or is that something that's, just an acronym, a part of like the old
Anachronistic.
anachronistic
Uh,
tool
yeah.
that
So what's happened, I think companies like Deloitte and Accenture have eliminated it in favor of ongoing feedback, because the annual review takes a tremendous amount of work and taking people off their roles. And frankly, you've really missed the boat if you have not provided timely feedback. In favor of timely, frequent conversations and feedback, I was recently talking with a head of, with a chief people officer of a big corporation, who was surprised to learn that as CMO and as VP of marketing, I would have weekly conversations with my direct reports and many other team members that were not reporting directly to me. This person was absolutely surprised. And I'm like, no, it's absolutely needed. And I would actually usually, I will set aside Tuesdays, try to do the same thing all the same time, every day, every week. So that way you can absolutely make sure that you are giving feedback to them and learning from them and understanding what their needs are. So you're never a bottleneck. And then by scheduling everybody on the same day, first of all, it's my frame of thinking on that day. It leads to greater efficiency. And then let's say if I'm traveling, I'm speaking at a conference or something, if it gets canceled, then it universally gets canceled for everyone and everybody gets very equitable treatment.
Yeah. So you're giving direct feedback, you're helping people, but you're giving feedback based on their actions, what they're actually doing to make sure that they're on track and really doing the right thing. Let's talk a little bit about hiring in that environment. How do you identify people that are strong, basically can do the job, can do the actions? And when a lot of hiring, we ask about the beliefs, we kind of ask about what they're thinking about the job. It's kind of part of the conversation. Do you still explore both those areas, or do you really focus on what they've actually done in the interview?
I usually hire more for attitude, and skills can always be trained. A
Hmm.
lot of hiring managers want someone who's done the precisely same job someplace else will come here and do it. That's kind of a little mentally lazy, right? I'd rather take someone who is very agile, who will learn fast, who can innovate, who can bring a fresh perspective. It's a very bad corporate habit to think that your competitors are doing everything absolutely right.
Hmm.
Not necessarily so. And so what happens when you're indexing to your competition, number one, you never really know what your competition is truly doing. But when you're indexing to the competitors, you're indexing to things that are incomplete and that you do not know about. What it really leads to is kind of Me Too repetition and mediocrity. Uh, Organizations that really, for instance, take off are the ones that reinvent themselves. For instance, in the certification and testing industry, and I've worked in three major global organizations in that industry, testing, inspection, certification. Uh, Intertech was able to grow meteorically, stratospherically, because it actually changed the marketing and sales game in a way no one else was doing. It broke away from the competition in the early to mid to in the first decade of 2000s, and it really changed its positioning where it was hardly on any small electrical appliance or device in the US to now you cannot go too far without seeing their ETL marks. So that made a world of difference. They did not repeat, they did not sing off the same song sheet as everybody else.
Yeah. So you must have quite the team to be able to execute that. And that takes a lot of focus to make that successful. So that's awesome.
Uh, you have to hire for attitude. Is somebody a lifelong learner? Are they willing to learn things? And then in marketing, you have to fail fast and allow for failure and experimentation, right? Failure is an amazing learning experience. Not every experiment will, you know, be successful. You have to adopt the scientific method, right? Why is it that we support the scientific method in science, but not in corporate America?
Hmm.
Hap Klopp, the founder of the North Face, famously talks about it. You have to experiment. If something's not working, fail fast. That's what makes Silicon Valley so successful
Yeah.
with innovation.
Fail fast and don't kill the people that are failing because you need them to run the next experiment, right?
Well, they'd be way better in not repeating the same mistake, or they
Yeah.
will have learned from it, right?
Right. But that's a key. Well, we just have a few minutes left. This has been a fascinating conversation, but I'd love to hear a little bit about Strategy Ark. What's that all about? What are you doing there?
But Strategy Arc takes all my expertise from disparate areas, and that's key because life is not like this one isolated thing at a time. You have to take a more holistic approach. For instance, if you look at marketing teams, a lot of them do not succeed necessarily or as much as they could because they're not tapping into the marketers' individual strengths to position them right on the teams, or they're not tapping into their talents the right way. So, and then there is the collaboration between marketing and sales, which in most organizations is a tortured affair. So, when each understands how to relate to the other and each works collaboratively, understanding where their strengths are, you can relate way better. For instance, if you have a colleague who has input in their top five, inevitably that person likes to deal with, they're like information hoarders. They like to collect more information. So if they're questioning you, it's not of them questioning you proper, it's how they're wired. They want to learn more. Somebody who has restorative, it's the type of person that likes fixing things. So they may not be as complimentary about success in something because they're looking for the next broken thing. So if you understand how people are wired, then you'll react differently to them. And fundamentally, all of that needs to be brought in the context of proper strategic planning. I mean, everybody says they have a strategic plan, but it's usually a kitchen sink of lots of good ideas. But if you're not strategic about prioritizing and executing on them, who cares?
So you're going to help organizations kind of navigate that, understand their people, build the right teams, and then help them with all the planning around that.
Exactly.
Well, that's
Drive.
exciting.
It's a very holistic approach.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well,
Thank
I
you.
think you're going to make a big difference with a lot of organizations. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about you, or continue the conversation, or Strategy Ark, what's the best way to connect with you?
Well, they can email me at jasmine@strategyark.com. Our website is www.strategyark.com. Ark is with a K. Think of Noah's Ark. It had solution for everything. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Jasmine Martirossian. Search for me, and I'm happy to engage.
Great. Well, Jasmine, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate being your guest on this podcast.